Man. Hey, ETM Hotel, Rennie Sean. Welcome to Peace. My name is Sean. Hey, like the show, share the show, tell a friend, tell a friend. We live. I think y'all hear me all right. Put a one in the chat if you can hear me. If not, we good? Okay, cool. All right, so I pinned the link, man, for anybody that wanted to join the discussion. Because we're gonna get into some stuff. So I'm gonna break it down real quick what I'm about to do. I'm going to read something. And if you look in the description, we're going to answer this is the discussion questions. All right. So, what are some moral values that are unique to conduct of scientific research? Should scientists be able to be accountable for their choice? Let me see if I could just put them in the chat for y'all. I ain't take no owl. I set the show up and then I came back, but hold up real quick. I'm gonna pull them up so y'all can see them. And then we'll get into it, man. All right, so let me share my screen. Y'all should be able to see my screen. So here go the questions, the discussion questions. Right here. I'm gonna put them in the chat. Discussion question 1. Discussion question 2. What up, Lavelle? Discussion question 4. So there go the questions right there. All right. So everybody know that these 4 questions are in the description of the video. All right. So that's what we're going to be dealing with. 1, what are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of scientific research? 2, should scientists be accountable for their choice of research pursuits if there should be, and that's a typo, published results are used for evil? 3, do you believe that some kind of scientific research should be forbidden? You do provide examples. 4, do scientists have moral obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? Let me go edit. All right, so now that we had the 4 questions, boom. Let me save that. Let me put number 2 back in there, the correct spelling. All right, so now that we have the 4 questions, and again, number 2 right there on the screen. I'm gonna give you a scenario. Well, I'm gonna give us a scenario, and anybody that want to join the conversation and get on the panel, I don't know if you're working at, not if you just tuned in, tapped in. You can come on the panel and discuss it if you want to. But hold on, y'all. We're gonna discuss the scenario, and we're gonna try to answer it using those 4 questions, or at least one of the 4. All right. So this is dealing with research ethics. And here's the case study. Archaeologists have located and recovered in the northwestern United States the remains of a 9,000-year-old skeleton known as Kennewick Man. The remains have been taken to the laboratory of an interdisciplinary group of scientists at a southwestern university in the United States, and the research team plans to exhaustively study them. Scientific analysis will include chemical composition studies, radiographic analysis, and attempted recovery of analysis of DNA. The scientific team leader has heralded the discovery, saying, "This is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest." He argues that the proposed work is important because it will shed light on on our North American ancestors and how they were dispersed on the continent. Before the work begins, several tribes of American Indians legally seek to have the research prevented, claiming that they are descendants of the Kennewick Man. They want the remains back so that they may properly bury them. The foundation for their claim rests on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990, and the thrust of which is to reunite living American Indians with their recently deceased ancestors. You have been retained as a consultant by the 3-judge panel of the circuit court that will hear this case. Everybody listening to me now, you have been retained as a consultant by the 3-judge panel of the circuit court that will hear this case. What advice will you give them? And should the research go forward? Remember, we have 4 discussion questions. So, what are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of this scientific study? Again, archaeologists have located and recovered in the northwestern United States the remains of a 9,000-year-old skeleton known as the Kennewick Man. The remains have been taken to a laboratory of an interdisciplinary group of scientists at a southwestern university in the United States, and the research teams plan to exhaustively study them. Scientific analysis will include chemical composition studies, radiographic analysis, and attempted recovery of analysis of DNA. The scientific team leader has heralded the discovery, saying, "This is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest." He argues that the proposed work is important because it will shed light on how our North American ancestors were dispersed on the continent. So before the work began, you had American Indians legally seek to have this research prevented, claiming that they are the descendants of the Kennewick Man, and they want the remains back so that they can give them a proper burial. And the grounds for their argument rest assured on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990, and the thrust of which is to reunite living American Indians with their recently deceased ancestors. So again, you have been retained as a consultant on this case during the 3-panel judge circuit court. And what advice would you give them? And should this research go forward? This is dealing with research ethics. All right. So Richard said he agrees with the indigenous people. What up, brothers from UK? Donnie said that he would ask respectively of the native to seek. Let me put these on the screen. Richard says he agreed with the natives. So you would agree to stop the research, and you would agree to give them back the remains. Donnie says ask respectfully of the native to consider that this study is being done in the name of science. Richard comes back and says cultural values of people should be respected. Okay. All right. Anyone else got a take on that? There's a bunch of us in here. Teddy, I know you just got here, but we're dealing with some research questions that I pose, and I'm going to put back on the screen. We're dealing with research ethics here in a case study of the Kennewick man. So basically, we're dealing with a moral value that are unique to a conduct of research science. Now, and this is a discussion. This is merely on the grounds of science, and also this is merely on the grounds of scientific research. So here's my take on it. If I'm a panelist, right, we're all consultants on a 3-judge panel circuit court, and we have to deal with the topic of research ethics, and the remainder of the case correspondence to the topic areas, we'll cover later. But we need to understand that, is this research morally justified? I put two up wrong, my bad. And those are the questions. Again, like I said, you can scroll up, but they're right here. I'm just putting them on the screen. All right. Do scientists have a moral obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? All right. So we got a couple answers here from Richard and Brother Donnie. So let me give my take on this. If you need me to repeat the scenario again, I will be glad to do so. So I'm gonna repeat it again because I do see we have some more people coming in. All right. So here's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. In the description of the video, we have 4 discussion questions. The discussion questions are centered around a case scenario that I'm about to read. Question number 1 is, what are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of scientific research? Question number 2 is, should scientists be accountable for their choice of research pursuits if their published results are used for evil purposes by others? Question number 3, do you believe that some kinds of scientific research should be forbidden? If you do, provide examples. Question number 4, do scientists have a moral obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? All right. Okay, so Archaeologists have located and recovered in the northwestern United States the remains of a 9,000-year-old skeleton known as the Kennewick Man. The remains have been taken to the laboratory of an interdisciplinary group of scientists at the Southwestern University in the United States, and the research team plans to exhaustively study them. Scientific analysis will include chemical composition studies, radiographic analysis, and attempted recovery of analysis of DNA. The scientific team leader has heralded the discovery, saying, "This is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest." He argues that the proposed work is important because it will shed light on how our North American ancestors were dispersed on this continent. Before the work begins, several tribes of American Indians legally seek to have the research prevented, claiming that they are the descendants of the Kennewick Man. They want the remains back so that they may properly bury them. The foundation of their claim rests on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990, the thrust of which is to reunite living American Indians with their recently deceased ancestors. You have been retained. This is everybody listening to my voice. You have been retained as a consultant by 3-judge panel of the circuit court that will appear to hear this case. What advice will you give them should the research go forward? Now, in order to properly address what has taken place here, we must understand that archaeologists have recovered a 9,000-year-old skeleton that they named or is to be known as the Kennewick Man. Now, the other important piece of this is stated that scientific hold on. The remains have been taken to a laboratory of an interdisciplinary group of scientists at a Southwestern University in the US, and the research teams plan to exhaustively study them. Right? Now, the scientific team leader has heralded this discovery, saying, "This is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest." All right. So again, the evidence here, based on the criterion of questions that we're trying to answer critically, is here. What are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of scientific research? Should scientists be accountable for their choice of research pursuits if their published results are used for evil purposes by others? Do you believe that some kinds of scientific research should be forbidden? If you do, can you provide examples? Do scientists have a moral obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? This question, number 4, best suits the research ethics regarding the case study of the Kennewick Man and the native Indians who are looking to get the body back. Now, scientists have argued that this is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest, right? We When speaking of human evolution, is knowing more about the history of the earliest man in history more important than the cultural and traditional nuances of the Native Americans who seek to get the body back from uh, the scientific team, the archaeologists who discovered this 9,000-year-old complete bone of the Kennewick Man? Is this ethically and morally okay? Brother Richard says that he's going to abide by the Native American Act, the Native Americans Grave Protection and Repatriation Act. Well, here's Richard. What up, brother Rich?
All right. Can you?
I can hear you a little bit, but you broke up. Okay, I can hear you a little bit now.
All right now. I hope I'm. I don't know if I hear. I think I see here a delay, but okay. My
No, no, no. You sound okay.
Okay, great.
You just got to make sure that you have your YouTube off. Yeah, that's what you're hearing. You're hearing YouTube in the back in your background.
Oh, what about now? I,
Nah, you good, bro. Go ahead.
yeah, well, one, I appreciate the question. I think that this in this time of scientific innovation, um, these kind of questions are important to deal with in relationship to the development of the capacity and development of science. I this question in relationship to respecting for the scenario that you pose,
Mm-hmm.
respecting cultural traditions is really important. And for when we look in our history of African people, it's really because it was because of medical research and scientific advancement in North America, particularly the whole thing of cadavers being used, being burial ground, being dug up and African bodies being used for the advancement of medical procedure and education was in conflict. So that's so there's a history there that makes me for the principle of scientific um, acknowledging cultural values in relationship to scientific discovery should be acknowledged as a means of ethics and social cohesion. So I'll just stop with that thought to see if it got through and it made sense.
All right. So my question would be to you. No, no, no. Let's use your logic. So, but let's back it up a little bit. All right. So what if science or the what we know is the body of science, right? What if that advancement never happened as far as the studying of the remains and all the things that actually went into place to help science advance using Africans and digging up the mummies and all of those things. If that never transpired, how far behind would we be today? Or would we have figured out another way to answer questions that they didn't know the answers to?
Uh, and I think, well, the short answer I believe is that we would have as in the name of scientific investigation, and in the name of respecting cultural values, um, um, the exploration, I mean, would just have went into other directions, and therefore, yes, um, would have got to some point. Now, um, would it be the same point? I don't know, but it would have got to some point if that's the question, and these other parameters are restrictions for the investigation going in that direction. So the short answer is, I believe, yes. Um, yeah.
All right. So here's my counter to that. Because remember, we're a part of a circuit. We are a 3 judge panel, and we're part of a circuit court hearing, and they want our advice. So your advice would be that here's my advice, right? In order to for mankind, in order to put the pieces of the puzzle together, right, Richard? In
Right.
order to complete the history of our evolution, and especially to answer questions about when did the Western world began to become inhabited. We know about Africa, we know about Asia, right? We know about Australia. We got answers in that direction, but we don't have answers for North America or South America, and when it comes to human evolution. So I think the scientist, when he pointed this out, he says this is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest. That is critical in answering the question of human existence in the New World, or what we know as the New World, 9,000 years ago, right? He says that. And we're obsessed, well, not all, but we're obsessed with wanting to know that history. But, and I'm saying this for people that's just joining in, here lies the problem in Richard's argument. Well, here lies, not in your argument, Richard, but here lies the problem in which Richard supports. The natives, all right, before this work began, legally was seeking to prevent this research from happening, claiming to be descendants of the Kennewick man. Hold on one slick second. Let me do something real quick. Okay. Can you hear me, Richard?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. All right, we're good. Now I was switching my internet. All right, so their argument is based on the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990. So the advancement of science hinges on an act that was passed in the 1990s that united the living American Indians with their deceased ancestors, and the living American Indians wanted to give the deceased ancestors a proper burial.
Hmm.
All right. So this is where I find it uniquely interesting when it comes to that point, Richard, of how do we advance science? So we need to explain to the Native Americans, whether they agree or disagree, that this is the oldest and most complete skeleton found in the Northwest. All we need to do is a little research on the remains and the complete structure of this 9,000-year-old skeleton, and we will be glad to hand it back over to you properly, and then move forward, per se. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I guess the juxtaposition comes up: the advancement of science versus the cultural, recognizing cultural uh, values, and which gets into cultural values and history, right? Which is I kind of contextualize this. I know it's raised that it's being based off of those indigenous people saying it's being based off of a legal um, um, process that they're going through to be able to have what ownership of 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 their remains,
Right.
cultural remains, and that's one side, and then it's the other side is their cultural belief system, which says that this would be considered a desecration by utilizing it, or being that remain that they feel a cultural ownership, and that's in the context of this society now, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have been in any conflict if they were under their own cultural and legal social order, right? It wouldn't be no
Mhm.
conflict because you know, but because they're in and has a history of why they're in a cultural legal well, they're in a legal construct that can say, well, we can utilize this, we can maybe disregard your cultural belief um, and customs legally, or we can disregard it in the name of science that would benefit um, quote unquote humanity in spite of your cultural values, which has some ethics tied to it, right? I mean, which is you're raising a question about scientific ethics
Yeah,
and
research
their
ethics.
values,
Mhm.
and you also where we're seeing how they come in conflict with social cultural ethics and values, and you're
Mhm.
asking the question which one has priority in relationship to this notion of advancement or this generalization of human society.
Right. So, all right, here's the counter to the advancement of this study. Now, how would the Native Americans know that they are the ancestors of the Kennewick man without evidence? Simply making the claim that you are the descendant of the Kennewick man without evidence would uh would cause some type of delay, right? So we would have to provide some type of linkage. Now, in order for science to advance, there was something very unique that was said in this in the way that they're going to do this study. Scientific analysis will include chemical composition studies, radiographic analysis, and attempted recovery and analysis of DNA. Recovering attempted recovery and analysis of DNA would provide the argument for the Native Americans that they are the descendants of Kennewick man because in this study, DNA is one of the factors, which would give them the rights to the remains of the Kennewick man. So science would actually, Richard, answer that question that has to be answered in the conversation, right? Why would we give you the body? We don't know if you're the descendants of this. However, we are doing a DNA, we are doing a DNA analysis that may provide answers to if you really are the descendant of the Kennewick man. And then we could yield the body to you. So science still has a way of being able to answer ethically the questions that they need to answer and culturally provide the Native Americans, due to the Graves and Protection Acts and Repatriation Act of 1990, their ancestor to properly bury.
See, and I know you're the way it's being contextualized, and I think I understand, and I say I think only it's the forward my thought in
Yeah, no,
the
no, it's a
dialogue.
discussion. This is a
Right, right,
discussion. Yeah.
right. Yeah, because it can be the way I'm interpreting it. It can be again a power positioning, right? Because you're really just talking about, well, if we use the tools of science, we can validate whether they really belong to you. So you're still engaging in scientific exploration
Hmm.
compared to you just telling us based off of your what history or belief, you
Hmm.
know, that that this skeletal remain belongs to you, um, and we can't for the discussion as far as being in on this panel, I would have to coming with my subjective bias, right? Because I would have to bring this to this dialogue that the advancement has been at the expense of other people's cultural values
Correct.
because of the placement of power of one side. In this case, the power sides on the side of the scientists more
Mm-hmm.
than the indigenous people. And I would have to say, well, if where do we try to create mutual agreement? And we
Right.
have to be able to create mutual agreement from the perspective of that the advancement of power are encroaching on those who are quote unquote powerless, because if they were powerful, you would just take their word for it regardless if you have evidence or not.
Right. So here we go again. Now, because it asks, it says, should this research go forward?
Right, right,
So, so should we? All right, we archaeologists, ladies and gentlemen. All right, for those of you who are just joining, we're just having a discussion centered around research ethics at this very moment regarding four questions that are in the description of the video. So if you click on the description of this particular video, if you X out of the chat if you're on your cell phone, click on the down arrow on your cell phone. In the description, there will be four questions. The discussion questions are: what are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of scientific research? Should scientists be accountable for their choice of research pursuits if their published results are used for evil purposes by others? Do you believe that some kinds of scientific research should be forbidden? If you do, provide examples. Do scientists have a moral obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? And in this instance, this is where scientists have to do a better job at explaining the moral obligations of their research to the Native Americans. Because if it is explained to the Native Americans properly, the Native Americans may want that question answered for themselves,
I agree.
although they're claiming to be descendants of the Kennewick man. They don't know exactly yet until they have been explained. So to Richard's point, yeah, they need to give the body back if it is not explained to them in this instance, because they didn't know the body existed until archaeologists recovered the body, and they found that this was a 9,000-year-old remain that was completely intact, and scientists was enthused about it. However, the Native Americans knew, because it says the Native Americans, before the work begins, several tribes of American Indians legally seek to have the research prevented. So now it changes the whole argument around. So should we continue this work if they were already trying to put a halt to it? So this is research ethics. If they were already trying to put a halt to the claims of this, then the work should have never went forward, and we would never know Kennewick man was 9,000 year old, was complete, and we wouldn't know his ancestry, pretty much so. So then my question to Richard in this discussion would be, then, if we halted the research immediately based on the grounds that they were trying to prevent this before it began, would evolution still have a question mark in regards to North American history?
I mean, yes, it would have a question mark. Um, you know, from the point of of ethics, um, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around, again, with my subjective perspective of scientific ethics, right? And values, moral values, you
Mm-hmm.
know, as a what? As a field of knowledge production, should it should cultural um, ethics and values in history be considered as a part of 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 that? Because in this scenario, it's obvious that other cultural values have to be taken in consideration even to the point that the people have to utilize the legal tools to halt. And it seemed like it's a and you rereading it, it's still on the individual team or the scientific pursuit was some arrogance um, going on, because if the legal process of halting was hasn't been considered yet,
Mm-hmm.
should the scientific community re, wait until that position is finished before they even further go into their exploration in the pursuit of science? Should they have waited compared to just going on and then discovering and now have to raise the question? Now is now the 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 legal question hasn't been answered, and the indigenous people are now confronted with um, what the evidence that this possibly, or from their system, this is a part of their people, and because of that, their value system and their ethics and their cultural practice should take priority. So at that point, it gets into the scientific community. What is that? The consideration of populations' cultural values should be a part of scientific community's consideration in relationship to the pursuit of scientific knowledge, regardless if it provides advancement or not, in relationship with just being a part of its moral or ethical compass as it relates to others. Should that value system be center a consideration as they move forward in the pursuit of knowledge production, if that makes sense?
Well, yeah. So I would highly recommend in any case, especially with the history we've had in the advancement of science, that uh, everyone should be up for that same scrutiny, because maybe the analysis of the Kennewick man's remains, and the samples and everything that they can actually extract from this complete skeleton would answer could answer questions in regards to medical science advancement, historical advancement, social advancement, and otherwise, because then it would give us a a, a better picture of uh, what the Kennewick man had to endure 9,000 years ago in North on this continent. So I want to move the conversation. Same four description questions, but I'm gonna take it to the use of animals in biomedical experimentation. All right. So what I'm gonna do is, and I'll read it once, I'll read it twice. I'm gonna give you the case scenario. Anyone in the chat uh they want to join the discussion, the link is in the description of the the link is in the chat, but we do have four discussion questions that we're going to get into, and we're going to deal with it. So it says here, you are a chair of surgery at the U.S. Medical School and an editor in chief of a prestigious surgical research journal. A manuscript has been submitted to your office, authored by a well known group of researchers who are located in another country. It describes a novel surgical intervention for serious burns. The data in the manuscript reported on the testing of this procedure in dogs. Upon reading the manuscript, you learn that the burn lesions were created by direct exposure to flame in dogs that were sedated, but not but they didn't use anesthesia. Having served a term on your school's animal care and use committee, you immediately recognize that such intervention would require anesthesia, and you have further concerns about how the lesions were generated. You investigate and find that the regulations governing animal use research in the country in which the work was done exist and have been adhered to. Your conclusion, however, is that the treatment of the animals is an egregious transgression of the U.S. Animal Welfare Act, which governs animal research. What do you do and why? So I'm going to read it again for everyone so that we're on the same page. You are a chair of surgery at U.S. Medical School and editor in chief of a prestigious surgical research journal. A manuscript has been submitted to your office. It's authored by a well known group of researchers who are located in another country. It describes a novel surgical intervention for serious burns. The data in the manuscript reported on the testing of this procedure in dogs. Upon reading the manuscript, you learn that the burn lesions were created by direct exposure to flame in dogs that were sedated, but not, they didn't get anesthesia. There was no putting them to sleep. Now, having served a term on your school's animal care and use committee, you recognize this problem, that they didn't use anesthesia, and you have further concerns how the lesions were generated. You investigate and find the regulations for governing animal use research in the country in which they work was done was adhered to. Your conclusion, however, is that the treatment of the animals was egregious transgression of the U.S. Animal Welfare Act, which governs animal research. What do you do and why? You want to tackle that, Rich?
That
This is a critical thinking exercise, ladies and
right,
gentlemen.
right, yeah. I was trying to. I mean, the scenario doesn't fit one of the questions that you have. That I guess is one that I hold that wanted to explore, and that's the question number three, as a relationship to the kind of research. Is that the how does I'm saying I want to see if I could be able to tie question number three to this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, because I believe that I question in the advancement of quote unquote science, and you hear me say knowledge production, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
pursuit, right? We're trying the acquisition of using the tools of science, the methodology of science, in order to for the advancement of knowledge, right? That could have more practical use once it's discovered. Um, and where we are now. So in this animal, and because I'm not really clear about, like that whole animal, what you call them, but animal animal research. I'm trying to see if I can tie that to that. Is this a case where, in allowing this animal to feel this kind of pain, as a way of being able to um, pursue the investigation of this scientific research. And I want you to, if I'm off, to help me make sure that I am blending legitimately together. Other than that, I can't, answer that scenario. But if it is, it gives me another example of in the abuse of this animal, or for the production of knowledge, is it as a principle, and again towards that moral compass in the scientific acquisition, is that okay? And I'm saying, I'm again, from my position as a, on this panel, I'm saying no, it's not. Because where the pursuit of science, and utilizing, at the harm of animals, the environment, or people, cannot be a justification to say that it's okay, and that's where, in the name of exploration or research, I guess, if I was able to pull those together, I'm saying no, because harming someone else in the advancement for the for the for the possible advancement, because we don't know if that if that experiment will actually produce any kind of tangible or intellectual understanding, you know. So, and that opens up a can of worms of when, in the advancement of knowledge production, scientific knowledge production, utilizing the procedure, do harming an animal or anything else becomes a legitimate position for science and knowledge production to advance. And so, again, out of my subjective position, I would say, no, it's not. Subjecting that animal to that type of pain is not acceptable, just because you're saying it's in the pursuit of science.
All right. So it says, so you wouldn't do anything, and then you just explain why you wouldn't do anything because it's in the pursuit of science. All right. So what about the people PETA? What about PETA? Remember, they're all about animals, right? But we have to take into account that this occurred in another country. And according to the ethics code of that country, they followed the procedure,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm looking at that. This is not the US. This wouldn't transpire on this soil because of the Animal Welfare Act.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm.
So do you publish the study, Richard, in this journal? Because
Mm-hmm.
remember, this is you understanding the data and you having the ability to publish and approve this work. So do you publish it? If the answer is yes, why? If that we got your explanation. If the
Right.
answer is yes, then why? If the answer is no, then why?
Mm-hmm.
Based on, you said you're trying to bring question number 3 into it, which would be, do you believe that some kinds of scientific research should be forbidden? If you do, provide examples.
And I
This would
wanted to
be a
use
case.
this as an
This would
example.
be a case of that. Hmm.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
since, if I understand, it's two thoughts that come to my mind, because since it's already been done, and as you say, in the legal boundaries, in legal boundaries, it's an acceptable, um, um, a, a procedure to do, and
Yeah.
therefore it's already written, it's already done, it's already written up. So that's the conflict that I would have in saying no, right? Um, at the same time, I would have to raise. I'm trying to raise that question, which doesn't address the situation, but raise the question of the what in you reiterating it, the question of, does science, this pursuit of the scientific method and the scientific pursuit of knowledge, does that have a universal basis that supersedes, uh, whether the legal nation state, or, as the last scenario, even the moral, cultural value thing? Does science have that? Just because it is in the pursuit of science, using scientific method, and I make a distinction of the method versus the knowledge production that comes out of the method, right? Does that and it's supposed to be universal in the sense of the discovery will not just be applicable to one area. It can be applicable to, whether it be quote unquote all humankind, to the planet in general, to the species, the diversity of species. It has universal application. Is so is Should that pursuit be curtailed within national boundaries and legal boundaries, because, well, it might not be legal over here, but if I do it over here, it's legal, so therefore I can do it. That's to the scenario, that's another question. So, and to the question of should it be published, because of that narrowness, I would say yes, with this commentary, because I think it's since it was legally done, but if the scientific team, or at least the scientific ethical team,
Mm-hmm.
looking at what the team did, make a commentary to what it's done, raise the concern that I'm raising. At least, yes, it should be published, and it should be published with that view, or maybe the opposing view of why it's justifiable, because it's universal. You should be able to go into another country where it's legal and do whatever kind of thing that's necessary, even if it's abusive or harmful to the subject that you're investigating.
All
That
right.
commentary should be added.
All right. So I think from this perspective in this case study, the main point or the requirement for a resolution in this particular case study would be a recommendation. That recommendation would be to make sure that the dogs are under anesthesia
Mm,
before you pursue the burn lesions.
mm,
Make sure that the dog is sedated, that they're asleep, and they're unaware of what's happening to them. And I think that ethically, in the U.S., because of our worldview and the way things are set up here, and the way that we look at things here, right? And this is what makes for the discussion, because the way this case scenario is outlined, there was no issue with the study until there was no anesthesia. The dogs were sedated, but not with anesthesia, right? So they
right.
should have been. So if anesthesia was used, right, to
Mm,
sedate them, then there wouldn't have been any contention in this. So we have to, as scientists, right? Well, not everybody's a scientist. I'm saying as researchers and understanding what scientists' jobs is and what they do, right? We have to understand when we're answering this question. Remember, this is practically critical thinking in the height of a case study. So if you're reading a study, you have to be able to have the ability to it on the fly to think critically and be able to point out points of contention and then points of acceptance. And here, if my recommendation would be anesthesia, then I would recommend that the researchers conducting the study use anesthesia moving forward to sedate the dogs.
mm.
Therefore, having some kind of moral or ethical grounds of research. Now, I want to go back to something real quick because that's the way that I would actually conclude on that. I would answer yes. I would publish the study, and then my why would be I would publish the study because the results were was exactly what we intended for them to be. However, I would highly recommend the use of anesthesia as a sedated element in this research versus what they use.
Can I raise 2 points that came out that I was stimulated based off of what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing. I
Go ahead.
understand the point. One, and I think that in this environment we're in now, as citizens, whether regardless, we're in an environment now where science is taking um, um, a more critical role in our lives and what we are engaged in, and therefore these moral questions, these ethical questions of how the procedure is done is, as citizens we should become, as you, and I appreciate that promote this. We should become scientific literate, and as you're doing here, which I appreciate, sharpen our critical skills as citizens, because other than that, we will not will be pulled along in the scientific development compared to actually being true observers, because this is, and not, it does have a political ramification. It does have a ramification of how we see ourselves now and in the future as far as our values. And the second point is that, which would be interesting, the question in the protocol, if not using anesthesia, was because looking for a specific outcome to see if a certain outcome was going to affect be affect that even though it wasn't brought out in the scenario of whether we wanted to see the pain tolerance, because that could have been a consideration within the protocol of that scientific research. And that's why it was given, it wasn't given any anesthesia. And that has to be considered too, which in both, in which you laid out as far as your conclusion, would it addresses it, but the understanding of how, what the scientific team is looking to discover is also important, compared to the effect after they went through the process, if that made sense.
All right, so let me outline this first. All right. Critical thinking is a cognitive process that clearly identifies issues and evidence related to a problem, thereby allowing defensible conclusions to be made. When this critical thinking about cases means that one must apply both factual knowledge and an understanding of appropriate scientific behavior to the problems encountered. It is important to remember when discussing cases that a consensus answer may not emerge. Nevertheless, several acceptable solutions to the problem may be found. Acceptable solutions must always be in compliance with the standards related to global consideration. I wanted to say that because most of the conclusions, or most of the responses in this particular discussion were not global considerations. They were local considerations, meaning locally the U.S. They were based on the grounds of what are the standards in the U.S. So from the first case study, we dealt with the United States versus the natives in North America, right? In the second case study, we dealt with the United States medical team versus somewhere in another country. You see, so those that can't be implied in our moral sensitivity, moral reasoning, moral commitment, and moral preservation has to yield in this instance, because we're not being critical. We're being personal in trying to answer these questions. So we have to remove, this is the part of critical thinking that traps us. Our ability or inability to remove all biases when conducting research. Right? This is why we're taking a critical thinking case study. We're using critical thinking and using case study approaches to be able to determine scientifically, are we really using proper research methodology to answer particular research questions regarding short case scenarios. So I just wanted to lay that out there. That was just a statement, but I want to go into the next one, right? I want to go into another case. All right, so here we go.
Hey, can I say, I hope somebody else in the audience come up here and rescue me, because I appreciate the dialogue. I just don't want to be.
Yeah. No. We're having a conversation. They scared. Yeah. We having a conversation, so they got to deal with it. The link is in the description of the video. For anyone that want to join, all you got to do is I pinned it in the chat. If you're on your cell phones, it's the little blue area. You can click on the StreamYard, come right on in. We'll be more than welcome to have you as a part of this conversation. So now we're going to go with another case. This is the use of humans in biomedical experimentation. Okay, I'm gonna read it twice. Now, an institutional review board, we're gonna call it IRB. Okay, that's the abbreviation for Institutional Review Board. Approved clinical trial of a new cancer drug is underway at the Cancer Center of Academic Medical Center. The participants in this study, all of whom are adults in the early stages of leukemia, are seen twice per month for treatment and follow up. The clinic visits take place in the Cancer Center building, which also contains research labs and teaching facilities. Due to the security measures recently put in force, the study participants must sign a logbook prominently placed at the receptionist desk, when they enter and leave the building. They also must wear name tags. A nurse working on this study is concerned that the procedures provided provide inappropriate public access to patient identification and are inconsistent with the patient confidentiality stated in the IRB research protocol. She brings her concerns to you, Richard, to you, audience, the director of the Cancer Center. What, if anything, will you do? So I'm going to give it to you again.
Yeah, please.
The use of humans in biomedical experimentation. An institutional review board approved clinical trial of a new cancer drug is underway at a cancer center of academic medical center. The participants in this study all are adults. They are in the early stages of leukemia. They're seen twice per month for treatment and follow up. Their clinic visits take place in the Cancer Center building, which also contains research labs and teaching facilities. Due to the security measures recently put in place, the study participants have to sign in a logbook coming in and coming out, and they must wear name tags. A nurse has concerns. Okay, and here it goes. A nurse working on this study is concerned that these procedures provide inappropriate public access to patient identification and are inconsistent with patient confidentiality stated in the Institutional Review Board research protocol. Now she brings her concerns to you, and you are the director of the Cancer Center. What, if anything, will you do?
Uh, make yeah, I can see that the you know the access. I'm trying to process because I can see the concern of the nurse in the sense of people are being people somebody else can have access to their information, that who these
Well, only
people
their
are.
names, only their
Right.
names, because they sign in
Well,
and they sign out using their names and they wear name tags.
right. And when I say that, it's because of the name tags can be disposed and whatever. The logbook is a permanent record for some, and that gets into whether the logbook is maintained or not. And in most cases, or some cases, logbooks are maintained for other reasons. So that record of that person is for others to be able to have access to, is identifiable. And what she's raising the point is, should they, since they are just, well, either way, I don't see no challenge in that, because if they're giving their consent, they have to give it in some kind of manner. I'm assuming, it's a lot of assumptions here. They have to give it, which is a recorded manner, whether so whether they sign in a logbook and have a name tag, even though that is more accessible. I would say that the sign in book, the name tag is okay. The sign in book may not be. I don't see that's too dicey for me to have a one side or another. So I'll go on the side of I don't see no challenge with it. She comes to me, I'm saying, well, understanding your concern, but I don't you see no major challenge with it. as far as if the patient said they seen a major challenge with it, that that this process, I, I would um, I would give some more weight to that. But if the nurse is saying out of his or her concern, I would I don't see no major challenge because there's a consent form that has to be assuming be formed because they are consenting. There has to be a mechanism of identifying that the right person did sign in at that time, so just in case, there's some mix up between people, and it has to be that day has to go back in the record to prove. So I don't see no problem.
All right. So, would you make any suggestions to um, how the people log in, or I mean, if they already have a name tag, right?
Mm,
They have to sign in to get a name. All right. So let's just be honest.
mm,
When
mm.
you go to these corporate buildings, and whether you have an interview or if you are having to sign papers such as financial statement papers, which are real estate agents, or banking or something like,
Mm,
well, not really banking. You got to go online and give them info. All right. So either way it goes, when you go into these corporate buildings and you sign in, right?
mm.
Sometimes they don't give you a name tag.
Right,
Sometimes they give you a name tag,
right.
right? Depending on the scenario. So in this case study, is you're saying that would you would you want to investigate the nurse's concerns, or would you take measures to investigate the nurse's concerns, or would you just conclude at that moment, like, hey, like, this is the process? Yes, our facilities are open to we got research going on here, we got serious research going on here, and then we also have students here that are a part of it. This is a cancer
Mm,
research center, right?
mm.
So everyone coming in and out of this building has some affiliation with cancer.
Right,
So I heard what you said, but just based on that notion, do you
right.
conclude immediately, or do you, because uh I'm asking this because if you believe that some kinds of scientific research should be forbidden, then you would have to give examples of that.
Mm.
But if you should scientists be accountable for their choice of, well, not that one, but what are some moral values that are unique to the conduct of scientific research? And then again, do scientists have more obligation to explain the implications of their research to society? Which that doesn't merit here to,
Mm.
as far as us answering that question. So we would, here's one. Let me come in and I'm gonna muddy the waters real quick. Let me just start over.
There
I
you
want to
go.
muddy the waters. All right. I am coming to write a scientific article on this cancer research center and the activities and things that go on in this center. I have to sign in. And as I'm signing in, I notice patients that are signing in, and the names of those particular patients. So, in my pursuit of writing a scientific article, I use some examples, or I use some of the last names, or I try to get access to these people's names so that I can interview them about their experiences
Mm.
inside the research center. No matter what I publish, is that research center now accountable because they allowed their patients to be exposed to me via
Oh,
that logbook?
I mean that definitely that third party should get consent of the patient, um, and if and the center is liable, to my uninformed thinking, the center is liable for the protection of that information of those patients. Um, so and they're also responsible to inform the patients if their information, even if there's just their name, is going to be used for this third party, this journalist for this article is going to be used. It's their responsibility. So the two different actors here is the third party getting the information without informing the patients to get consent, and the center responsibility to the patients and not providing information to a third party without informing the patient. It seems that in that that's the procedure, because this isn't correct me if I'm wrong. This isn't primarily specifically around researching. This is more about the controlling of information and
Okay.
the those members who are participating, their information, whether it be their information as far as their name, identification, or even how they're being the effect of the cancer research drug on them is information that they have to still have consent to, it seems, to be, for a third party to use, or even a party that even the center itself to use. They have to get they have to they will have to provide their consent as a means of procedure. Other than that, they're just being used and abused.
All right. So I think that there's some consent issues in that. That's why I pretty much want to muddy the water. Now here it is. We're gonna move on to another one, and we'll make this one like the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Ownership of data and intellectual property. So a pre-doctoral student working in the laboratory of her mentor is gathering data for a federally funded project on which the mentor serves as principal investigator. The student is, of course, going to use the data for her dissertation work. The student and mentor have a terrible falling out. The student leaves the lab and finds a new advisor. The original advisor notices that data and materials related to the student's project are missing. The student readily admits to removing the tissue sections, gels, and computer disk, but asserts that they are hers, the product of her sweat and blood. Do these data and resources rightfully belong to the student? And what data ownership issue apply to the situation? I'm gonna read the scenario again. Let me let somebody in real quick. Oh, yeah, there you go. Well, hurry up, dude. Connect your device. All right. So while we waiting on Chavis, there you go. All right, I'm gonna read the scenario again because we was interrupted by this rude dude who took forever. All right. So a pre-doctoral student working in the laboratory of a mentor is gathering data for a federally funded project on which the mentor serves as a principal investigator. The student is, of course, going to use the data for her dissertation. The student and mentor have a terrible falling out. The student leaves and finds a new advisor. The original advisor notices the data and materials related to the project are gone, they're missing. The student readily admits to removing the tissue sections, gels, and computer disk, but assert that they are hers, the product of her sweat and blood. Do these data and resources rightfully belong to the student? What data ownership issues apply to this situation? Do you need me to read it again?
I'm clear, but I'll wait to
Yeah,
see.
read it. Read it one more time.
Okay.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, for the slow people in the back named Chavis. A pre-doctoral student working in the laboratory of her mentor is gathering data for a federally funded project. Keyword. A
Yeah,
student.
right there. That's done. That's done. That don't belong to her. It's federal information. Everything going on with that.
Can you let me finish?
No,
A
I'm not.
A pre-doctoral student working in the laboratory of her mentor is gathering data for a federally funded project on which the mentor serves as a principal investigator. The student is, of course, going to use the data for her dissertation. The student is going to use the data for her dissertation. The student and mentor have a terrible falling out. The student leaves the lab and finds a new advisor. The original advisor notices the data is missing from the project. The student readily admits that this information belongs to her. It is the equivalent of her blood, sweat, and tears. Does the data and resources rightfully belong to the student? And what data ownership issues apply to the situation?
I agree that it doesn't belong to her, but I think I would like to bring in a broader question. Again,
Hold on. Remember, we have 4 discussion questions.
Okay.
All right. This discussion question is all over number 2, because whatever is in this dissertation is linked to a federally funded project, which in return will have the name of the people who funded the project, which would be the federal government. So would the scientists be accountable for their choice of research pursuits if their published results are used for evil purposes by others? Or do you believe there's some kinds of scientific research which would be forbidden? Or do we have science moral obligation to explain implications of their research to society? Remember this I'm giving you all of these, or if there's any moral values that are unique for the conduct of scientific research. Remember, this is a student. She's using this as a dissertation. She believes that this is from the results are from her honest blood, sweat, and tears. And yes, she's using federally funded resources to gather or obtain information for this project, but she has a falling out with a advisor, finds another advisor, right, that can help them move this information forward. Does the research belong to her still? And is there some type of ownership issues that apply to the situation?
Well, the question is, the new advisor, are they under the same the federal contract for that research is being done as well? That's the question coming to me, as the old advisor, because if he or she is, then it's not like she's taking it outside. She's just transferring it to another place, which would be under the same contract. Now, if that new advisor isn't, if that arrangement of that research is tied to that advisor for that federally funded project, then she has no real ownership of it, as I perceive or think I understand. So she can't take it no matter what work because she's working under the contract, and the contract is tied to the person who's the advisor, and ultimately. So that's the way I perceive it.
All right, go ahead, Jay.
No, I pretty much agree, because he's pretty much like, she doesn't own none of that stuff. She just owns he just owns her dissertation. The dissertation isn't even finished. She's working on it, utilizing data that they are funding. So, like, it don't belong to her. She doesn't even have a complete data yet. She's trying to obtain the data. That's just my opinion on it.
So in this instance, right? Because I'm trying to get I'm trying to get y'all to think critically here, right? So I think we all would agree that the data and the resources do not belong to the student. But if the student has another advisor, then wouldn't the advisor, the new advisor, be able to access and obtain that research and that data to help the student continue the project, uh, and will continue their principal investigation and conclude the work that needs to be concluded, because this is going in a dissertation, and it not be an ownership issue at that point, because you know the student will still rightfully be able to complete the
But
task.
my thing is, she gonna have to cite them, huh? In her dissertation, right?
Yeah, she's going to have to cite who being cited regardless.
I'm saying that's pretty much explained. Okay, that's their information. The fact that you had to cite them, and yeah, I mean, as far as that would have to be, as far as the advisor, that would
But
have to be under that contract, or that would have to be the communication between who's funding it and I guess the advisor, right?
yeah, yes, the premises of ownership is clearly on the funder and the advisor,
But
because the funder has the obligation to award access to the data that has been, no matter who does the research, they're paying you to do the research. So they own the rights to the research. And the advisor is overseeing the funds that are, a part of the actual whole dissertation and the research that's being committed. She feels like it's hers because it is her that is using the funds to complete the research.
she's irrelevant in this scenario. It's the advisor, and the dicey part and the unknown based off of what you read is the other advisor. Is the other advisor considered the same status as the original advisor? If he is, then that other advisor can get that data that she can continue to do under his supervision. If he's not, if it's tied just to that first advisor, that other advisor doesn't have, as again, not that I understand it, because that's a technical, seems to be a technical question.
Mm-hmm.
If he or she wouldn't have access or to be able to even get that information, or that person wouldn't have to give it to them. I think the broader question about ownership of data, especially in this time for us, what I'm concerned with, and I don't know which one of those questions, if it fits in that you pose, is in relationship to our DNA data. Each one of us, we're the scientific extraction of DNA, and out of that, the innovation that can come out of it, or the utilization of it, can be utilized by others. So the question of, do you own your DNA? And so even when you swab to get your ancestral done, or when you go and get your blood type done, that does that information that is uniquely yours, regardless of what institution that you go to, do you have ownership, and they have to contact and contract with you to utilize that, even to tinker it in any manner? In this environment, that's, if we look at that information, that DNA information, that data as proprietary, that's where the the scientific development and the commercial development using scientific tools and who has ownership seems to be a question that we're engaged in right now. Um, and taking it and pushing that a little further, if with the and I use this CRISPR-9 like I know what it is, but in the realm of the tool of innovation with that you can manipulate, um, even to create what they call franca food or animals, and in some cases, on the cutting edge of being able to um, produce um, possibly human species. Is that data? Who owns that? Is it in the name of innovation, and is it the scientific community, is it the commercial community, or is it the when they do what's the now gene therapy, is that, are you the owner of that data even though it's been manipulated and it's working for you? um, to me,
Richard.
those are the moral and ethical questions that data collection runs into.
All right. So, as opposed to the ownership of data and intellectual property,
Mhm,
in the instance of this particular case study, you
mhm.
have a pre-doctoral student working in the laboratory, which she had gathered a federally funded grant to help her complete this study.
Oh,
And
she gathered
this
it. I thought the advisor gathered it.
no, the student
Oh, if she gathered it,
working in a laboratory of listen now, the student is working in a laboratory of her mentor, gathering data for a federally funded project on which the mentor serves as principal investigator. The
so it
student's mentor is
is the
the principal investigator. The student, of course, is going to use the data for her dissertation. The student and mentor get into an argument and have a following out. The student leaves the lab to find a new advisor. Attitude. The original advisor noticed that the data and the materials is missing from the project. The student admits to removing the data and believes this is the product of her blood, sweat, and tears. Does the data belong to the student? The answer is no.
no. I agree.
So, what data ownership issues? The question that hasn't been answered by you yet, Richard, is what data ownership issues apply to this situation?
There is no data. I mean, it's clear that the and what I got for you, if she got the grant money, and in order for her to get the grant money, she needed an advisor to be the principal advisor um, for that. The two are tied. She can't just move to another principal advisor unless she gets another. That's. So I'm still staying with. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing understanding it in order to, because you're saying I'm not touching it, but that's the way I'm interpreting it.
Oh man. All right. All right. Good one. Good one. Good one. All right. All right. All right. I said that would be the last one, but
Oh, here
um
you go. Here you go.
I
But
want to
what
deal
do you think about this? I mean, if I may, this thing about data ownership. I mean, is
the
that a
data belong
broader
the data belongs to the people that are funding the project. The intellectual property belongs to those funding the project. You as a researcher are doing what you know how to do best, and that is to conduct the methods used to obtain the knowledge. You can write about that data. You can you can house or interpret your interpretation of that data, right? Because out of all of the research that you do, and they funded the project and they own the information, when you write about it, you have to give credence to the people because you're a part of that research team or whatever. But you get your props from that when you, in this instance, when you use it in your dissertation. Your dissertation is yours, but the data that's used to get you to the point of the dissertation belongs to the people that funded the project and the overseers, which you need their permission in order to even do your dissertation because you have to give credence. So critically thinking, just being a critical thinker, the first thing that I'm doing is I'm ruling out, no, that does not belong to you. It does not belong to you because I actually paid for and funded this. You needed my dollar in order to conduct the research. You knew how to do the research, but you did not have the funding to do the research. Now, when you put out your dissertation, which could appear in journals and articles and things of that nature, you're going to get all the credit for your work done in that dissertation. Right. But no, this research, this my stuff. And then if I want to hire someone else to move it forward or refute it, I can do that because it belongs to me. And now I am submitting, right? I am submitting a body of work done by these researchers in this field to be scrutinized by the scientific community. I have the right to do that. If it's independently done by someone else, it's like making an album or a song these days. If you didn't use any major label to put together your project and put your project out, they don't have the rights to that.
Right.
But if you signed with a major label to do all the things necessarily to do to actually get your project out there, then that's why they own the masters and you don't. This is the same scenario. Now, you could either fork over the money to fund it yourself and not use any federal agency fundings, or you do your own Cash Apping, GoFundMe, or whatever you're going to do to raise your money. Sell some Krispy Kreme donuts, whatever you're going to do. I would, Robert Rand, double R. I would disagree about the process of collecting data. Yeah, nobody truly owns data because anybody could collect the data, but the project is funded by someone who owns the intellectual property that is being utilized in this collection of data. So they have rights to that, the ownership of that. But nobody, like rocks, no one owns the rock, right? But everybody can go to this rock and investigate the rock. But they would own it in a sense of it being used in the scientific community because they funded the project. But if it's just a rock on the street and I was like, man, I found this rock down the street and blah, 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 then that's one thing. But if somebody paid me to go research this rock, it's different. Because now you have to take into the account of how this research was used and how it was published, and if it was used negatively or positively, right? And all of that. So that's how that whole notion would work. So basically today was about critical thinking and using case studies to actually open our minds to removing our biases and not infusing it. In this instance, there's a couple conclusions that I actually drew from this based on the way Richard was answering a lot of the questions. He had more questions, but the focus and the vocal point of this particular case study is to use the research, the discussion questions that we have and try to align the case study according to the discussion questions and then critically analyze the the scenario and withdraw. Now, Rasta did a really good job at just trying to be direct and understanding what was being said, and then giving his responses, which I couldn't put them up. And then a lot of people in the chat also follow behind with that, Fitz and others. Um, and this is a discussion. This is how science works. You have you have Richard's perspective, Chavis' perspective, my perspective, Fitz, Zane, CK, everything is everything. Brendan, I think a couple people came in here late. Anything that came out of mine is hers. Yeah, Sonny. You got Double R, you got Mongo, what up, bro? You have Teddy. I'm missing some people. Um, Charles, basically everybody that's here, all of us that are here, we're not going to see everything the same, but we have to go and deal with the facts. So what are the facts? In the case study that we used, the facts were we had a student who was trying who used who had a mentor, and they had a federal grant to do some research that was going to be used for a dissertation. So at most, the ownership of this research is yielded on the federal funded grant that is overseen by the mentor. The two people have a falling out for personal reasons, has nothing to do with the project. Yet the student, out of an emotional response, takes the data that actually belongs to the people who funded the project and claims it as hers because she found another advisor, and she was using this information in her dissertation, right? But if she found another advisor, and here's the key part of this, if she found another advisor, her advisor should have informed her of what she should do or what she should not have done in this switching of advisors, right? Because ethically, the one advisor has to communicate with the other advisor and clear them on that, so that both of them are on the same pages, and now the project can pursue forward, because they just can't jump into something unless they're going to start all the way over, and then they don't have the funds to do so, so they're using funds that was granted to a mentor. We got to take all things into account with this particular scenario in order to come to we're not going to come to a conclusion, because like I said earlier, we're not going to come to a conclusion or a consensus, because everybody is going to see this differently. This is how science works, especially when you're thinking critically. But we may have a majority that may come to a similar agreement based on how the data is interpreted. So our next job is to but our next job is to argue, right? Let me go back so I can tell you what we're arguing. What data ownership issues apply to this situation? So now we've answered one question about the student. Does it belong to the student? We all agree. We had a consensus. No. But now we have to argue. Well, we don't, because we said no. But what data ownership issues apply to this situation? That is where the argument is. If someone says yes, if you say yes, and if you're a part of the members that are all a part of this particular case study, and you said yes, she got the right to it, now we get to argue over ownership issues that apply to this situation. And those of us who agree that the answer is no, we stand on the left. Those of you that agree that it is, you stand on the right, and we're going to let you get your point out. So, Richard, I'm going to use this as a scenario, because have you been vaccinated? This is just an example.
Yes.
All right. When did you get vaccinated, Richard?
2 weeks ago, I think.
First shot. Which vaccine did you get?
Moderna.
Moderna. Good choice. Now, for the listening audience that don't know that Richard, that didn't know this until I asked Richard, he was not for this vaccine initially because he had questions. Now, let me ask you
And I'm
another
still
question.
not for it. I'm still not for it.
Were you forced to get the vaccine
Yes,
by your job?
yes,
All right, so they mandated you to get the vaccine.
yes,
And instead of you going to go get another job, you opted to just get the vaccine.
yes.
Okay, so economically and other scenarios played a part in you ultimately succumbing to
Coercion,
getting the vaccine.
coercion. Right.
Coercion. Did you grow a third limb, Richard?
No, that that okay. No, no,
No, I'm
that's
just
not
playing.
my. That's
I'm
yeah,
playing.
yeah. That's not my issue. I think that these the basis of this here that you raise is the issue, and why I thought it was important for me to, even if I can't be understood, for me to be engaged, because it's principal questions about scientific research and and the value and the value system that's being used for scientific development. That's my issue, and I just think that we're things are to the first scenario you raised. The cultural question is being denied. Um, to the second question that you raised in relationship to this vaccine and scientific advancement using vaccine in relationship to the harm. Now whether it's immediate harm or long term, we don't know. I mean, and that, and because we don't know, I mean, it's we deal with the immediacy, but that
I don't
question is
know.
still there. You know, so those are so it wasn't a question of third limb or all that other stuff that I hear people bring up, or I think I hear people be up. My thing is, are we in a period where science is moving faster than quote unquote the human population can be able to understand when you talk about scientific literacy, or are we exploring in areas that may have consequences, long-term consequences that in the short term we don't see, and that short term may be a generation, but may have significant changes in the long term.
All right,
Um,
so Richard, all right, we're in the middle of a
mhm,
pandemic that has cost the lives of I believe we're over 800,000 Americans, right?
mhm,
If we're not there, I think we do have data that supports that we're near 800,000 people
mhm,
dying. And at this point, for the last 100,000 or more people since March, April, May, June, July, I'm specifically saying those months:
mhm,
March, April, June, July, August, September, October, November, and now it's December, this December 2nd. For anyone that has died over the last 6 months, right? From COVID, from the disease, from COVID-19, right?
mhm,
There is a vaccine that prevents over 90 plus percent death,
mhm,
right? In the middle of a pandemic that is claiming thousands of lives a day.
mhm,
And we still haven't got that under control. And people
mhm,
being infected by the
mhm,
caseloads.
mhm,
However, how many of those people are showing up in the hospitals? Large portion of them showing up in the hospitals, we got issues. But the thing is, we have a working vaccine in our population that is preventing hospitalizations and death. Now it comes back down to our understanding of vaccine science and how it works. So when you posed your questions long ago in regards to your understanding of what you just basically said is science moving too fast. This thing has been under research for 30 years.
Right.
So this whole vaccine science has been studied. Now the mechanisms of moving it forward has been simplified based on connecting dots that took 30 years to connect.
Right.
So
And
that wouldn't be necessarily moving fast. That was
I mean,
moving too slow because RNA, because our understanding of RNA has been implemented for a while now. This has helped the development. You laughing? What's up?
because you hooking me. You know, I don't. I mean, I understand. I mean, I understand the position that you take, and obviously, you know, as you said about the right side, left side, I'm on the other side of it, and I have my, you know, whether it's informed or uninformed opinion about it.
Mhm.
And recognizing that this is, yes, it's a new technology, right? That's the way I interpret it. Yes, it's a vaccine, but it also is a technology. And the reason why I make a distinction, even though it comes out of science, you know, knowledge, scientific knowledge, but it's an engineered approach that we can say, and I think they even named it novel in relationship to how it's being introduced in the human population. That's my base position, right?
They were talking
Um,
about the virus. The virus is not.
I'm talking about the technology. I'm not talking about the virus. I mean, you could talk about the virus, and that's to me
Yeah,
another. That's
Richard
another
issues is
side.
with
I'm talking about the
technology.
technology.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying about the technology, right?
Right.
Okay, so this brings me back to the point that I made to you before a long time ago.
Right.
When microwaves were introduced to society, that was technology advancing the way that
Right.
meals could be prepared.
Right.
However, you still had people that knew that a real meal was cooked on the stove
Right.
in an oven. But then before we had a stove and an oven, we had a cast iron,
Right.
like a crock pot type of a thing where we fed it fire, and then it would boil up to a particular degree or temperature, and then we would cook on top of that. But before that, they were using uh, logs and with hooks and a bar to cook
Mhm.
their meat and things of that nature. And then the other foods would be either put in inflamed. So what I'm saying is the evolution of how we cook today. Now we have these, what is that, air fryers, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the evolution of how we prepare our food has changed.
Right.
And the evolution of how we protect our bodies has changed because we went from inoculations was the most deadliest way. Then we went to a phase. We went into a first generation way of weakening the virus to administer a vaccine, you know, to administer a shot. Then we went into using a cold virus to help us, you know, maneuver and manipulate a particular virus to defend itself. And now we're in the age of mRNA technology. For
Right.
anyone that didn't know what I was talking about, I basically walked you through the last phases of how we got to the point of mRNA technology and how vaccine science has developed. It took 50 years really to develop the first vaccine. Do we have 50 years to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus? We don't have 50 years. What about do we have 5 years? If we wait 5 years to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus, we're at 800,000 deaths in 2 years. If we didn't have a vaccine rollout in February in the end of last year, how many more deaths would have occurred?
Possibly double, huh? I mean, because you don't
More,
have people
more,
right now.
more than double,
Right?
bro. Because listen, people
Right?
didn't
You're
want
right.
to
You're
listen
right.
to me. People didn't want to listen to me before when I said this. I said the SARS-CoV-2 was worse than the Spanish flu. People argued it up and down and said, no, it ain't, no, it ain't. Look at how many people died. We've already surpassed the Spanish flu numbers in 2 years. The Spanish flu number deaths we know as a total that we know today, we know it as a total. We
I
ain't
think
even
I
out
think
of the pandemic.
I think this
We still
question
count.
I think this question came up before, when I raised it, and so it doesn't discount. I just,
Yeah,
really to
yeah, yeah. Go
reflect if
ahead.
you know it, and that is not necessarily the number, the aggregate number, but the percentage. And I believe you answered that another time, but I'm not sure. Is the percentage greater today than that um, at that moment? The percentage of people that died. I think
Yeah, it was two different populations. There
you're
was
right. The
less
population.
people at
That's why
that
I'm
time.
looking at percentage size
Hmm.
compared to
Well,
aggregate number size.
today it would exceed the percentage.
Okay.
If we go by that today, it would exceed that.
Okay. Now this is the part that I'm afraid what you raise and or as a rebuttal,
Hmm.
or as a my on my side. I ain't gonna say it's a rebuttal, right? Because the facts are the facts. I'm not discounting that. My concern obviously is based out of something else. So as a reaction, and this gets into a moral question, because when you're bringing up the number of this being a pandemic, and the number that have died and possibly could die because they refuse to take the vaccine, which is the possibility of preventing that death. Is that an acceptable number? That's the question I have to
Yeah,
raise myself.
epidemiologists have posed the same question.
Yeah,
What is too much death?
right.
What do we accept? So, all right. So
And that is a moral question, right?
80,
As it
yeah,
relates to scientific advancement, right?
right. 80,000 or 100,000 cases per day is not acceptable. It's not
Mm.
acceptable. 1,400 to 2,000 deaths a day is unacceptable, right?
I'm yeah.
SARS-CoV-2 is the third in 2 years is the third leading cause of death in America.
Right.
It's the third. We don't have another virus. Listen, SARS-CoV-2 has killed way more people, right, than a virus that has been around 30 years that they don't have a solution for, and that is the HIV. They do not have a solution for it. And but this particular, we have a solution, and it's still killing more people. So my thing is this is that we have to vaccinate more people. We have to slow this thing down, and we have to do it in a way that people can actually understand vaccine science and the advancement of technology so that we can get things under control. You know, for us to think that it's just common for people to die from a vaccine preventable disease is atrocious. That's atrocious.
I, I'll accept my and I recognize, and the only probably reason why I can be able to have this position, right, is from a position of comfortability, right, in the sense of whether emotional comfortability or just that, in the a personal comfortability, like it's not happening to me, so I can have these ideals about what's the acceptable number of deaths. What number of deaths is really acceptable in this moment in time is because emotionally I'm detached from it and making my judgment, or personally I'm not feeling that in making my judgment. So I reckon, when you say it about critical thinking, right? You have to recognize your subjective, how your subjective reality informs your thoughts or your critical decisions about how you analyze things in order to come to a decision. I don't know if you would agree with that, because we do come with a subjective position in relationship to thinking critically, right, about we have to be informed, but we also have to recognize that our information is based off of some already subjective positions that we hold.
Yeah,
Would,
but in
would that
science,
be
right?
acceptable?
Well, in science, that's why in science we have to remove the emotions.
Right. I mean, it's not just the emotions, because our value system or our worldview can also inform,
Alter. Yeah, it can
you know,
alter.
right. So it's not just, our in relationship to how we come utilize the information we get in, or even deny the information we get in. And supposedly science is supposed to be the scientific method, and the scientific approach is supposed to be able where you're supposed to be able to suspend your subjective so you can be objective. And that gets into the question, can we really be objective, in engaging in critical thinking or engaging in the scientific methodology? Can we, as the agent, be truly objective? Some said at one point that was the guiding notion, that we can engage in science from a truly objective perspective. At another point, seen that they were saying that might be an impossibility, that you can truly be objective as you engage in your scientific or even critical thinking perspective. I mean, the process. So keeping those in mind, I just have to. I operate from. I'll acknowledge, not necessarily to limit the debate, just to understand, like, so I can communicate where I'm coming from in relationship to others who might not hold the same position. So to that point of what's the acceptable amount of deaths in relationship to a virus, that and that in relationship to the technology that could suspend or eliminate a virus. um, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not seeing we're at that number. I hear the number. I
Hold on,
understand the moral compass
hold
that
on, hold
that
on, hold on,
comes
hold on,
out
hold
of
on.
it,
Say
but
that,
I'm
say
not.
that, say that again. Hold
I
on.
am. I'm not. I'm not at that position that we are at that number where of deaths because of the virus. I'm not saying that we're at that. What I hear, the position that you're making, is that we're at the, and the scientific community is making, we're at the number of deaths are unacceptable. And I'm saying for this virus, the number of
So
deaths is not
you think that
acceptable.
the numbers? Okay, so you're saying that the number. I just want to make sure you're saying that the
Right.
number of deaths are unacceptable.
I'm saying it's not. I'm saying that
You're saying that the number
for
of deaths are acceptable.
right, right.
So okay, so 1,400 deaths a day is acceptable.
Unfortunately, I'm saying at this point right now, in my ignorance, yes.
All right, so you're okay with losing. Do that math. Do 1,400 times 30 days or 31, or we just do the average of 30 days.
Hmm.
All right, that's 42,000 deaths a month.
Hmm.
So you're okay with 504,000 deaths a year from a virus that preventable disease.
I'm saying that I don't know what I don't know what the
And
what
remember, and remember that comes to an average. There's been
right,
months where we've hit
right,
80,000 deaths,
right,
100,000 deaths. Remember, we have a vaccine. Last year, we were seeing 80,000 deaths,
right,
100,000 deaths. We were
right,
seeing numbers like that. We have a vaccine now, and we have cut that down.
right. But I don't think we've cut that. See, I mean, there's a in my that in the rationale I come to, to come to that conclusion. There's a lot of other moving parts that make me, say that. Besides
What is
possibly
but
my
here's but here would be the question for that.
Mm.
All right, because when you say, because you was about to say your based on what data?
Mm. Well, based on what the size of the human population is at present.
We can't focus on the human
Wait a
population.
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You're asking me. I mean, you're asking me my basis, whether it's relevant or not. I can accept that, but
well, I only gave you, because I didn't give you numbers on a worldwide basis. I gave you numbers on just the U.S.
and that's why. But the virus that's what makes it a pandemic, because it is a worldwide virus.
Okay, so again, so let's go back to the point of emphasis. If we are experiencing almost 150 or more, I don't know, about 150,000 or more deaths a day worldwide, a day,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're okay with 100,000 people dying a day?
Based off of, yes, I don't have no data. Yes, at this point right now, I don't see, the urgency at this point, because I see in war, and people are dying from other kind of things, that those numbers, even though they're dispersed,
More people are dying from COVID than war.
yeah, right now, and that's only because but at different points in time. I'm just saying,
It's a pandemic.
Huh?
It's a pandemic.
Right.
When we say it's a different point, got to specify specifically what type of time it is and why. I mean, the significance of that particular time. You kind of minimizing it when you do that.
Yeah. I am. I am. I mean, I'm minimizing it because I have limited information and limited technical knowledge to be able to be more specific. So I have to do like most of. I'm assuming there's other people who are more informed and who, Sean, you made yourself more informed as far as following the procedure. That's fine. But some of us, we have to go off of what we know or what we feel or what we believe.
But
in order
that's limited, right?
I accept that. Yes.
Most in that acceptance, you have to accept that, like, you basing everything off of what you basically believe, which is very, very tricky.
Yes, and yes.
And you put yourself in a position where you start appealing to incredulity.
And what is that?
So it's a fallacy where you don't believe something. You basically don't believe something. So because you don't believe it, that means it's wrong. That's a fallacy.
No, I'm not. Wait a minute. Because I don't believe it.
I mean, look. Can you pull that up real fast, Tom? So I'm on my phone. It's an argument from incredulity, or just put incredulity. Incredulity.
I mean, I got the gist of what you mean, and I'll accept that. I mean, I'm accepting that I'm an imperfect in relationship to the total body of knowledge that's out there. I'm an imperfect being in relationship to making decisions. I accept that. So I have to go off of what I think I know or what I know. And in the end, as you say,
you can't go by what you think you know.
I mean, I have to. I mean, that's. I don't have to. I can't put that.
Because you can make a bad decision that could cost you your life.
And I have to, just like like anything else, I have to take the risk of making a bad decision. But that's a personal thing. I mean, now I wouldn't, like in the scenario that you raised, if I was on a panel, or more appropriate to what we might engage when we're when we go to jurors in a trial, the jurors are probably the most uninformed individuals in that arrangement, right? But they have to, based off of the information they get, they have to make a decision, and in some cases, decision about a person's life, whether they live or die.
Right? But you're dealing, like, we're talking about science, and science is a little bit different. It operates different than how a courthouse works. Like, they all the time find people guilty, and then some evidence comes out that contradicts what they believe, so they have to go back and change that. I mean, this is science works similar to that,
Right.
but it's based off the data, not necessarily what we believe. You know what I'm saying? It's what we know. What we believe and what we know are two completely different things. And if you don't know much, you put yourself in a very, very tricky position.
I mean, that's true, and that's why people, the one reason why I was, to the best of my ability, was following Sean and Ankh and listening to others like yourself, and even in raising questions with others, so that I can become informed to the best of my ability. Does that change my bias? Does that change my belief? Maybe to some degree. Um, but but that's better, at least trying to attempting, whether I agree with it or not, to become informed to see if I will change compared to not becoming informed. But to the point that you're making, as I see it, in the end, my decision or my opinion or my point of view, does it come down to my belief, even if I'm not aware of it? I have to accept it. Yes, it probably do. And therefore, should I put myself in a position where I make a decision for the lives of others? Um, no. And if I'm forced in a position to make the decision with that bias and with that belief, coming down to that belief, if I'm forced in that position to make the lives of on the interests of others, um, um, then I would have to deal with that conflict and those contradictions as
All right,
I
so
put other
Richard.
people into it.
All right, Rich, I gotta slow you down. I've been letting
Okay,
you go on
thank
and
you.
on. All right, so the argument from incredulity is also known as the argument from personal incredulity or appeal to common sense or divine fallacy. It is a fallacy in an informal logic. It asserts that a proposition must be false because it contradicts one's personal expectations or beliefs or is difficult to imagine, right? So when you say, or when you have the thought process to make the assertion that hold on, Discord. When you have the thought process to come up with the assertion that, man, look, these people, 1,400 deaths a day is acceptable, you have lost it.
I'll accept that.
Facts though. You tell the truth.
Yeah, when I'm saying it like that, you have lost it. That means that there's families, right, Richard? There's families out there
Mm-hmm.
who wholeheartedly, right, wholeheartedly no longer have that person in their lives. That means
Mm-hmm.
that's happening to 1,400 families a day.
Right.
The trauma from that alone is an
Right.
issue because now it's a psychological problem, right?
Facts.
The ability of knowing that someone's life in your family out of these 1,400 people could have been saved had they been vaccinated
Right.
is a reality for 800,000 people. You had people on their deathbeds begging to get vaccinated. The vaccine is not a cure. It's not going to stop or prevent you from dying at that point. It's too late.
Right.
But you have that. So that assertion would be, Richard, there's evidence of 800,000 people that are on their deathbed that would disagree with your assertion.
I mean, I agree.
That
I mean,
that that,
I'm not.
that 1,400 is too much.
I'll
So
go with the
let me.
numbers.
How many people do you know? Hold on. How many people? Just answer this for me. How many
Mm-hmm.
people do you know are you close to in your family?
I guess all of them.
Okay.
I
So
don't have to. I don't have
how
to.
many family
I don't
members? How
speak.
many
I
family
don't.
members do you have?
It's 10 of us siblings, and
Okay.
and
So
expand
out
out.
of your 10 siblings, if I took one of your siblings away a day and left you, does that not and you could have prevented the other 9. Does that not play on your psyche at all?
Probably. Yeah, probably will. I mean, it's like being a soldier in war and having to kill somebody. Yes, does that play on your psyche? Sure, it does.
But what if Chavis says, but that's not too much death?
I mean, again, I know I'm speaking, and I think I mentioned I'm speaking from a position of comfortability. So that's different in making it, in giving my opinion now. So I recognize that. And if I was engaged, and I have to use warfare as far as personal warfare, and I'm in engaged in combat and having to and a one-on-one or one on a group have to kill somebody.
Yeah, but that's different. That's different. We're talking about a virus, a
yeah, which I don't
we're
I don't
talking
have
about
no,
something that we can prevent, bro. We're not
right.
we're
I
not
mean,
talking about war.
I personally, if my, as you've seen, and me holding a position that I'm not for it, I had to weigh to what degree am I not for it? Because you see that I got it, right? So it obviously,
Right.
obviously being not for it was not all that. I don't have that kind of moral or principle compass to where I'm just going to be, with other factors in play that I have to deal with, maybe coming out of my belief in relationship to my decision, that I'm not going to take the virus. I assume other people are doing the same thing, and that's why they're going to do it. But when you're asking me in a more distant position, you know, what is the acceptable amount of death and what options are out there? I'm just saying, well, maybe the number that you're raising might not be, because that number might go down over time for other reasons.
But okay, so before a vaccine, that number was sky high. There in one
Right.
in one
Right.
instant, you're talking about anytime that you hear 100,000 deaths in a day. Let me take that back. I'm sorry. Anytime that you hear 10,000 deaths, 20,000, 50,000, imagine that. You listen, 800,000 deaths would take away 60% of the major cities in this country. That's almost all of New York City, and they live on top of each other. That's almost Houston. It's Dallas. I don't think Dallas got 1 million people in it. That's Atlanta, that's Nashville, that's Memphis, that's Knoxville, that's Lexington, that's Louisville, that Cleveland, Cincinnati. Where you from, Richard?
Philly.
Philadelphia. It ain't 1 million people in Philadelphia. What I'm specifically saying is, it's got 1 million people.
I think so.
Let's see. Well, let's go look at the population of Philadelphia. Oh, yeah. That's half of Philadelphia. So the Philadelphia today, it would be half of that. What I'm saying is, when I put that in that type of context, bro, because we can't see that far out. So let's wipe away cities. So if I tell you 60% of the major cities or more in the U.S. would be obsolete, can you fathom that?
Yeah, I mean, from a historical perspective, yes. I mean, because at one point, 1.5, 1.6 million people didn't live in Philadelphia. From a historical point, if we take the population, the population numbers that I've seen, and maybe you can validate from 1945.
We talking about right now.
Right, and
now,
that's, I mean, that's
1.5 million people in Philly.
Right. That's. I mean, if people dropping like flies, yes.
No. Hold on. Let me add to this.
Okay.
All right. How many people died from gun violence in Philly? It's like over 500 people, right? Is that not excessive? Is that gun violence, kids killing kids in Philly? Is that not excessive or that's expected?
It's excessive, yes, but is it expected? Yes, also.
All right. So it's excessive, right? 500 kids, because that could be prevented, correct?
Right,
Do you agree?
right,
That's 500 families that are
right,
affected by silly gun violence. People driving down the street just letting guns off at each other.
right,
They don't even know who they're shooting at. They're just shooting at somebody trying to catch a body.
right.
So what I'm saying is, if that is excessive, triple that without the gun violence and make it a virus that is a preventable disease.
Mm-hmm.
That is what's happening. 1,400 or more people are dying a day. Oh, yeah. You're right, Rasa. I got to take that back. You're right. Yeah, it's like because everybody living on top of each other now. You're right. But I could take out a whole borough. I could take out one of those boroughs. That's really what I meant. So, like, if I could possibly wipe out a particular borough in New York with the amount of deaths that we actually have. What I'm trying to get you to see, Richard, is this. And thank you for the correction. To get you to see is this, Richard, is that the deaths are excessive, bro. The deaths are excessive. So I don't know if you got time. So
I'm working.
all right.
So I mean, look, I
No. The cause of deaths in the U.S.
mm-hmm.
I want to look at the cause of deaths in the U.S. All right. We know heart disease leads, right? We all know that. Heart disease and cancer. After heart disease and cancer, we have COVID has stepped up in that department as the third leading cause of death. So what I'm trying to get you to say,
wait a minute. Heart disease and cancer and COVID is the third. So is that saying that heart disease is taking out more people than COVID?
Heart disease has always been the leading cause of death in America for like quite some time.
Right. And
right?
Can I just hold for there because this
no,
is where
you can't because you're not because you're going to misrepresent it. You're going to misrepresent it. I said from the gate that I said that COVID at the beginning of this was the third leading cause of death. It's only been around for 2 years.
Right.
2 years.
Right.
It can exceed that without a vaccine. Now you have to go and look at things that cause heart disease before you go harping on, well, shouldn't we be focused on this? Should we be focused on that?
No.
Mm-hmm. Listen, this disease can trigger a heart issue.
Right. That's
which
true.
Can lead to your death.
Right.
Which can increase the number of heart disease deaths.
Mm-hmm.
My point is this: 2,000 people per day die from heart disease. That's excessive.
Mm-hmm.
1,400 people per day are dying from COVID, and that ain't really a realized number. If we go break it down, we're just going by based on recent numbers, because if we go with the yearly average, it's going to be more people than that. The point is the three leading causes of death of people from heart disease, cancer, and the coronavirus is excessive.
I'll accept that.
But hold on. But we have a vaccine that can prevent the excessive deaths for the third leading cause of death in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That can take that down to a narrow gap of where it could be maybe 100 people versus 1,400 people.
Mm-hmm.
We can always continue to work on the heart because that's going to be health. So that means we got to change diets, the way people eat, exercising, and things of that nature. We can do preventable things like that as well, but we have to have enough people that will succumb to those changes. which we don't, because you're gonna have people that overeat all the time, that don't exercise, that don't drink a lot of water, that's gonna continue to do whatever they're gonna do, and then we have succumbed to certain cancers, and this number is about to drop because they have vaccines now that are designed to prevent all these different types of cancers that they're focusing on, which is going to be a tremendous effort. So, Richard, if I had a vaccine that would prevent heart disease, I'm not saying that that one exists and they could do all that, that's weirdest thing ever. But if there was some type of vaccine that could do that, to take that number from being the leading cause to like the fifth leading cause of death, would you get that vaccine or would you question that vaccine?
I don't know, but I'm gonna say try to be consistent. I'm gonna say yes, and what you call a fallacy or fantasy. I was saying we're at the point right now that they can be able to make artificial hearts for everybody, right, and implant them successfully. Science is at that point.
So there's some type of solution for some of these people that are actually going through these scenarios.
Right.
Yet,
And for
yet
everybody.
they don't have but what? Hey, one thing about the United States is they don't have the coverage, Richard. So what are you going to do?
I mean, no, wait a minute. Now, I'm not going to pursue that because this is where the logic and the thinking, the scenario building gets a little iffy for me, because all of these different ifs, not that it possibly can't, not that it can't be done, but because other things is preventing it from being done, it's acceptable to have all these. And I don't want to shift your point. So the vaccine is the point, and it's not acceptable. I got it. The amount of deaths, but you're also raised that the heart is, heart disease is another, whether by diet or by the technology.
Yeah, there's so many different mechanisms that trigger our heart disease.
Right.
You could actually be exercising, and then all of a sudden
I
succumb to a
know
heart attack.
people have done, and I mean they ran, they were runners, the bikers and whatever, and had a stroke, at a certain point. Ate healthy and all that. I mean, not a stroke, but yeah, had a heart attack. I mean, it just happened. I mean, even as I monitor mine, there's abnormalities that occur over time that has nothing to do with diet or exercise, just what happens to an organ, at a different point in time for different individuals. That's just the way we're made, in that sense. But when we talk about science and the capacity to be able to assist, to provide intervention, to limit the risk at an early point, we can't say that the technology or the science isn't there. As you say, I mean, in this simple example, it's other factors that would prevent me from not just my fear, to be able to say, well, look, y'all done told me that this here heart is at this stage right now. Go ahead and put another one in, so that I can have more. I don't have to worry about that. And they'll tell me, well, you got some other considerations to deal with. Not that that don't exist. You got other considerations that's on your side.
Okay, so here's the point. You're not against an artificial heart, but you're against the vaccine.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So no. Hold on. Mm-hmm. So Zane brought that up. So here's the other thing, that this vaccine prevents hospitalizations and death. Mm-hmm. So it's not just death that we're looking at. We're talking about hospitalizations as well. So this would, all right. So now we know that this prevents hospitalizations and deaths over 90+%. Guess what can happen? Well, guess what's been happening since this pandemic? They have been putting off different surgeries. Right. Some people have died because they had a surgery postponed because the hospitals was filled with severe COVID-19 patients. Right. And they didn't have the manpower to actually, or space to have these surgeries.
Right.
That in itself says, Richard, we have too much death from a preventable disease. We have too much hospitalizations from a preventable disease. And that that preventative measure is the vaccine provides that real time. And here's the thing, and Ashley makes a Fitz, he makes a good point here. That's why it's harder to prevent. There are a number of different cancers and many different methods to try and prevent it, and it's not airborne. Thus, viruses can be prevented by one-shot vaccines. That's why people have to be vaccinated, because these things that we're talking about are preventable. That those cancers and heart issues that people are succumbing to, those need more concentration. I would rather free our do you agree first that the concentration on cancers and heart diseases need to be a primary focus versus something that we can prevent?
Yes.
All right. So you agree to that. So therefore, the vaccine benefits outweigh the risk. If there is a risk, that mandate made you get that shot.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to come down. I mean, if I wanted to, I ain't, especially being in Philly, I ain't too comfortable with sleeping in the cold. So when I gotta make the choice,
you ain't comfortable sleeping in the cold, huh?
No.
Right.
That boy weighed that risk. He weighed the benefit and the risk.
Yeah. So you succumb to the whataboutisms, pretty much. Well, what about if I ain't got no money to pay these bills?
Oh yeah.
What about
Yeah.
All right. So now that you succumb to that, right? Have you had some reaction to this vaccine that had you doubt getting the vaccine? Have you succumbed to that?
The doubt was the hesitancy was more from a principle perspective of the technology than about the effect of the technology. I mean, I hear I wasn't. As somebody said, I might be a psychopath because I guess, and until I actually hit that moment and I realized, this thing where I try to recognize that death is inevitable. And not that I walk out here trying to kill myself. I ain't suicidal, but death is just another aspect of life. That's my, as Chavez said, that's my belief, right? And that's what that's what I would like to think that my belief. Now, when it come down to that moment,
no. That's a reality. What you just said, that's a reality. That's not your belief. Death is a part of life.
Right. But people
unprotected is suicide.
Right. It's suicide. And society is trying to give us these panaceas on an individual and a social level that we can prolong it, the inevitable, and that's.
I mean, you can like not walk into, like, I'm right here I'm gonna show you. I'm right here by the highway, right? I could walk to the highway, or I can not and prolong not die. Just by saying, you know what, I'm not gonna try to go touch that yellow line. you prolonging it, so you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just you're getting a window into the way I operate in the world.
But is that an honest? Okay, now hold on, because we got people viewing this, and
right.
I don't want them to think that this is an acceptable behavior, or to make it seem like that if you think like this, then you're gonna do something. This is This is a product of why scientific integrity, methodology, and etc. And critical thinking is needed. It's
I agree.
needed because it prevents that type of logic from even being a thought. It's needed because it will help us outthink the ignorance.
Mhm.
It's needed because it will help save your life. So what I basically mean by that, it is something like methodology is something that we could utilize in our day-to-day lives.
I agree.
And ladies and gentlemen, just through a critical thinking exercise and getting to this point of the conversation, right, is an example of how scientists are trying to further the discussion in their circle, and then how we are doing it outside of that circle, trying to understand that they can't relate to us. We know this because we've seen scientists trying to relate to us, and people have issues with that. So when we're building a bridge back to say, hey, look, there's a small community of us that actually do understand the science, and we're going to show you, we're going to try to explain it to our people as best as we can, and then you can correct us along that way. Here's the bridge. And you have some scientists walking over it, and then you have some people walking over to the scientific community and back and forth. That has to happen. That has to happen because we have to prevent the things which we have control over. We can't see a virus. A virus isn't a stop sign. It is not a red light. It is not it is not something that exposes itself to us. But if there is a preventative measure to defeat that, then we have to yield to that and succumb to the data that represents that. Now we have to know how to interpret the data to be able to relay it back to say, hey, you know what? This will help me be a pillar in my community, a pillar in my own household, a pillar to my family members, and we advance it forward from that perspective. But if we're not thinking critically, and we're not using proper logic in its context, then we adhere to what Richard is going to tell us in just a second. Go ahead, Rich.
No, well, I don't know. You tell me. I'm listening.
Okay. So we would adhere to the different thought processes. This is just how the mind works, or this is just how my mind works in regards to X, Y, and Z. Like, we have to do a better job at knowing how to apply critical thinking on a
I
day-to-day
agree.
basis, and analyzing data, and transferring that into a different avenue for us to solve problems that are affecting our lives. So
I
when
agree.
Richard says 1,400 deaths is acceptable. And then you have people like, the hell it is. I didn't want my grandmother to die.
Mhm.
She still had more life for us. We were supposed to go on a family vacation. We were supposed to do this. We were supposed to. But nature had other plans.
Right.
Mankind, for as long as it existed, has set out to answer questions about this world they did not understand. And one of the greatest questions that have been answered in mankind is vaccine science. Having the ability to understand that there is a invisible um virus that can kill you, and but you can prevent yourself from that. So there's no more plagues as it was maybe 500 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 2,500 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and so on and so forth, all through our existence as Homo sapiens sapiens, and even the hominid species. If we didn't know how to answer the question on how to prevent a virus from killing us, the things that you work so hard to have today, you didn't need in the beginning.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true.
So the goal for our existence is to understand the importance of vaccine science.
Yeah, yeah,
And
Yeah.
one of the more important features of this, Richard,
Mm.
is to make sure that you have your copy of what SARS-CoV-2 taught me.
You know what? I definitely want to get it. Again, I've been following you from the whole development, but I just think that it's important to have it as a part of my library. Hopefully, it won't get lost when I'm gone, in the sense of because I think the technology is going to grow. So, what you did for this quote unquote common person, provide a self exploratory of how you went about looking at this. That's, to me, is like a journalist reporting in that in arena, and I think that was I respect, and that's commendable, and I think that kind of work needs to be done by a lot more of us who are not necessarily in the academy, or who are not necessarily in foundations, or who are not necessarily in the business enterprise. Again, from the perspective of us being citizens who have to make decisions, because in the end, they are political decisions that we have to make. We can disagree, we can debate, but I agree we have to be informed, because we really are the ones that should be pulling the levers on these bureaucracies and these institutions that affect not just our personal life, but
Yeah,
as
but
you
if you don't
imply, the
but if you
general.
don't know how if you don't know how to do those things, then all of
Right,
that
and
doesn't
that's
matter.
and that right, and that's why what you did in showing your evolution is showing people how to do it. And in these kind of discussions, it's showing people how to do it. Now, whether we listen or not, that's another thing. But we can't say it's not available to us, because y'all make the point all the time, or you make the point all the time. People ain't going to Scientific America or those medical journals, or and trying to decipher these terms. They're not, in our lives. That's why they're making this stuff so simple, which for us to supposedly get this kind of information. But we're not, we're consumed with a lot of other things. So for somebody who can take the time out to quote unquote break it down, because they had to break it down for themselves. It's a benefit to our quote unquote our community and our society. I'm not I may be ignorant, but I'm not I'm not stupid. So I recognize that what we need, especially because I hold this core belief right now, um, and looking at the last thing I looked at, those things. I think it's in the what you call them. I put it that they just self creating robots, self creating, right? I mean, and that's, I just put it in that in one of the what's that, the Concord, what do they call it, the under the scientific journal. They're doing a lot of things, not just creating the technology of COVID, that we should, and where you started in asking us those four questions, we need to be informed enough to be able to answer them as these things come up, to be at least to be able to say, just like those that indigenous population said, hold up, that's my ancestors' bones. Now I know what you want to do, but that's my ancestors' bone. We need to be informed enough to be able to do that. And when we're not, and then give at least a rational to be able to communicate with those who are in the field, to be able to communicate to them, this is why I'm saying this. And even if it gets down to the end, it's because I believe it, and that's what I'm operating off of. Now the question is, I'm not coming in your world, you coming in my world. So what gives you the right to come in my world and tell me what I need to do so that it can benefit everybody, when I'm just right now trying to benefit me? I mean, not to go on a tangent, but that's, so I commend what you did, and I just just got to get the book.
Yeah, you got to get the book. You got to get it today. Right now.
Right now, right
So,
now,
so,
go get it.
look,
Right now.
y'all, leave me alone. I'm trying to get these people paid.
You're going to get them paid, but you
Yeah,
got to get this book right now, because
but I do appreciate this
what
kind.
what's missing is your element of this book. And I guarantee you, when you read this book, right?
Wait a
you're
minute,
gonna
Sean.
feel you're gonna feel better about
Sean, I listened to all.
that
You know, you
man.
done
That
kept me up at 1 o'clock in the morning listening to you go on and
this
on.
book
So,
different though, because there's
I
some
mean,
stuff in
but
the book I ain't argued
like,
intentionally. Intentionally,
okay,
I knew what to argue, what not to argue, but there's some stuff in this book that actually helps advance the perspective of why. Because there's a person on my Facebook post right now talking about what people can expect, talking about how they had respiratory and breathing issues, but an herb can help treat these issues. And I'm over here like, but you had COVID and you couldn't even get out your bed to walk to the bathroom. No herb helped you get up and walk to the bathroom. It took you, and you said it took you, you couldn't even get out of bed for 24 hours. You was in bed, you was bedridden, and it hurt for you to walk anywhere. You couldn't even get out of the house. It took you 6 days to leave your house. So you know what I'm saying? You didn't have an herb that actually could get you up in 24 hours and get you down the street. You couldn't breathe. So, that whole notion that herbs was helping treat something is crazy.
I mean, yes.
It
I
didn't
mean,
prevent
I
it
don't, I
didn't
don't, I
prevent
don't
the
want to go
spread
down
of
that road.
disease.
I
No,
don't
no, no.
just.
I'm saying it. I'm saying this for people to know.
Right.
Herbs did not prevent the spread of disease in this lady. She succumbed to the disease every day that she had contracted SARS-CoV-2. When she contracted SARS-CoV-2, she had a bout with a disease on a day-to-day basis, and her herbs was not working. And she was complaining to me like, I know you're going to tell me I should have did this, I should have did that. Her ignorance kept that from happening. Had she had a vaccine, she doesn't succumb to any of that. She may have had would you rather have, Richard, would you rather have would you rather clear the virus within 72 hours, or would you rather go through 2 weeks of scrutiny?
I ain't in the pain.
Not knowing if you're gonna live or die.
I ain't in the pain, so I mean, I try. I mean, there's a couple times that I tried to do that wrestling with it for a minute. Trying to deal with that Negro bravioso or whatever. But
Yeah.
I like. But and that's why I try to do things that where I won't put myself in a position where I have to deal with pain. But
All right, so look,
question, I ain't in the pain.
the link to the book is in the description. The link to the book is also in the chat. I'm about to end today's show, man. Look, I might be back on later tonight and with some information. However, I just want to just keep people updated as far as Omicron goes. I'm not saying anything about Omicron just yet until I get more data. And I wish that the media was a little bit more patient with science so they can allow them to do their job and properly investigate Omicron and get the published and scientific information that we need, right, to answer certain questions. Because if we talk about it right now, we're still going to just be talking about it because everything is in hypothetical, because there's a lot of unknown. What we do know, I can talk about what I do know about Omicron, and I can be brief about that. I can talk about the spike. I can talk about the mutations and things of that nature. I can do that, but that's not what y'all want to know. That's something, well, not everybody. That some people might want to know that because they're geeky and into their science, but other people want to know about how does this affect us on our day-to-day basis, whether we're vaccinated or unvaccinated. It's all about status, and that has to be answered. So until I can answer the correct questions properly, I ain't saying anything about it until I get the data. However, look, man, get the vaccine. The vaccine is a preventative. The vaccine prevents hospitalizations, the spread of disease, hospitalizations, and deaths. It is shown to do that no matter the multitude of which variant. If you're eligible for boosters, get your booster. If you are one of those people who are healthy and feel like, hey, look, I'm healthy, I'm still doing this, doing that, now I don't want to get a booster at this point, stay there. You know what I mean? Stay there. You still have a vaccine that is preventing over 96, 97% of hospitalizations and deaths. So you still are 40% from your initial vaccine, and it is what it is. And I catch y'all on the flip side of this thing, and I'm out.
Thank you for engaging.
Done,
All
gang.
right. Peace out, y'all.
you.